everyone, I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. As we move into the final days of the Trump administration, the transition period is finally starting to show signs of looking like an actual transfer of power. It comes after the House voted to impeach President Trump for the second time, a distinction held by no other president in U.S. history. Unlike the first impeachment just over a year ago, 10 Republicans broke away and voted with the Democrats. The outstanding questions now are, what will the Senate do and when? The president did not mention impeachment in a pre-recorded video released after the vote, but he did urge his supporters to refrain from the violence that led to this impeachment while continuing to deflect blame.
I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement. We have seen too many riots, too many mobs, too many acts of intimidation and destruction. It must stop. Whether you are on the right or on the left, a Democrat or a Republican.
Photos from the past 2 days show workers on the White House grounds unloading and carrying out boxes. You can see Trade Advisor Peter Navarro here emptying his office. The White House pool also captured video of Biden-Harris inauguration banners being set up across from the North Portico. The president-elect applauded what he called a bipartisan vote cast by members who followed the Constitution and their conscience. He did not say if he supports the Senate voting to convict President Trump on the incitement of insurrection charge or barring him from running for office in the future. Security is set to be much tighter in Washington for the inauguration than it was before the siege on the Capitol. Streets around the Capitol, White House, and National Mall are being barricaded through the events next Wednesday. States are also activating some of their National Guard members to send to D.C. Many are having to balance that with their own security prep due to threats to state capitals as well. Zeke Miller and Olivia Beavers join me now. Zeke is a CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for the Associated Press, and Olivia covers Congress for Politico. Welcome to you both. Olivia, I want to start with you. Before we get to inauguration, I want to ask, first of all, how you are doing, because you were there inside the Capitol as it was being attacked. And, you know, I read your first-person account in Politico of what that was like and the accounts of your colleagues as well. It was absolutely chilling. How are you doing?
Elaine, thanks for asking. I think that, the trauma is still sort of setting in for some of us. My experience was in the House chamber when it was evacuated. And for us, I never saw the face of a single rioter. And so we kind of had this, ignorance about what was happening outside those walls. And we didn't know just how gruesome and ugly and brutal it was getting. And I think that, when I think about some of the police officers, some of these staffers, some of the members who did have, any kind of run-in with a rioter and thought that their life was in jeopardy might have had a worse experience. But, some of the reporters that I evacuated with, we started a chat group, and we're talking about the trauma and how our body is processing it. It doesn't go away, the glass and everything gets cleaned up a lot faster than sort of this fear that embeds itself in your body.
Your car dealer will hate me for showing you this, because I'm about to rip away their big fat commission check and put it back.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that you and other journalists are sort of supporting each other, because it's so important to acknowledge, the gravity of what happened at the Capitol. So I'm glad that you're able to talk to us about that. I'm glad you're here to analyze what is to come, because this story is far from over. Olivia, have we learned anything more about the accusations from members of Congress that some Republicans allegedly aided in the attacks planning, according to some of these members of Congress?
Well, actually, that's something that we're trying to still figure out. We're not hearing the names of the Republican lawmakers that they are accusing of giving these tours. And the irony is I remember when I was walking into the Capitol, I also saw groups of people, and it struck me as odd, and I thought maybe they were family, But when I bounced this back with some of my sources, they said families shouldn't have been there. They should have not been giving tours with constituents. They should have not been doing it with anyone because of COVID measures, safety measures. So it should have been a bigger flag to me on a day that, I just sort of was focusing on what was ahead with the certification vote. But people were around the Capitol in the days ahead, and I think that is a red flag to these Democrats. Now, that's certainly something that we want to know is who they're accusing this of, and if there's enough cameras around the Capitol that maybe law enforcement is investigating this, but the members themselves who are making these charges are not really giving more information to follow up on at the moment.
All right, we'll continue to watch that. So, Zeke, in the meantime, we know this security threat is ongoing. How is it impacting planning for inauguration?
It's impacting the scale of the inauguration, which is already, the biggest event that takes place in Washington, D.C. every 4 years. It brings in law enforcement officials from across the country. National Guard are always part of that planning. But it is now not just Inauguration Day. It's Inauguration week plus. The National Special Security event perimeter around the White House, around the Capitol, all of that was put in place more than a week early. Road restrictions. I mean, I was walking out of the White House yesterday, and it is very difficult to get around Washington. You're seeing National Guardsmen. You're seeing police, federal police, as well as local police on almost every corner around downtown. And it's going to affect the program. You're not going to see large crowds celebrating as President-elect Joe Biden is sworn in at noon on Wednesday. You're not going to see the parade, and some of that was because of the pandemic, but now also because of this security situation. The perimeters have just gotten much bigger. The security posture among all of the planners has gotten a lot more alert. And we're seeing the president-elect himself have to alter his schedule. We were told yesterday that he's no longer taking the train down to Washington from Delaware as had been planned because of the security situation. So there may also be other changes to the program in light of the events of last week.
All right, I'm sure we'll hear about those changes here in the coming days. In the meantime, Olivia, the Senate now has this impeachment trial on its plate when senators reconvene the day before inauguration. What do we know about how quickly things could move, and have any Senate Republicans indicated whether they'd actually support conviction?
So some Republicans have floated the idea that they are open to it, and it's, Pat Toomey, who is retiring pretty soon. It's some of the moderates who have also always been in sort of a swing vote with Republican senators like Lisa Murkowski. We're watching Susan Collins. But there's also that New York Times story that came out earlier this week, which really kind of was another earthquake to hit Washington, which is that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is not entirely ruling out the idea of voting to impeach President Trump. And he's been telling his close associates, as Politico has confirmed, that he believes that Trump committed impeachable offenses. So, it's not necessarily yes, but he says he wants to wait and see how the trial goes. And I've actually, I saw shortly before we hopped on here that other Republicans are echoing that sentiment. So Senator Richard Shelby is also saying he wants to wait and see, which to me shows that, this is completely different from the last impeachment where you had only Mitt Romney voting for one article of impeachment, and here you have groups of Republican senators saying that they're open to the idea. But we do know that the article of impeachment is not being sent over to the Senate today, but we believe it will be soon because Democrats want to make sure they don't look like they're dragging their feet for a threat that they say poses a great national security threat. But, it looks like it's going to be happening after Biden is in office, and we imagine it will happen pretty soon after. So that might also run into a conflicts with some of the policy agendas that the Biden administration is going to try to pass.
Yeah, I imagine so. Zeke, what do we know about how President Trump is spending, his final days in office here, apart from what we know is some handing out of medals? Is there much information about what he's actually doing in these final days?
Did you know that you and your family may qualify for roofing relief this winter? If you have a roof leak,
usually the most reliable window into what the president was thinking and doing was his Twitter feed, and he's not on that anymore in light of his behavior last week of expressing sympathy and support for the people who carried out that violent insurrection at the Capitol. He was kicked off of all the major social media platforms. So it's gotten a lot harder, more difficult to understand what he's thinking and what he's doing. That said, the circle around him has gotten much smaller. We are told that he's stewing about the second impeachment. He's upset that more of his allies have not defended him in that. We've seen a lot more license on the part of Republicans to try to distance themselves from the president. His grip on the party, which a week and a half ago seemed so strong that he was the leading contender for 2024, is now potentially, a week or two away from not being able to hold federal office again if the Senate were to convict. So his standing has changed, and he's struggling to come to grips with that as he's in a period of transition for himself. He's going to become a private citizen once again on Wednesday at noon, but also the prospect of his political fortune had changed so much. It is a very small circle of aides around him that are trying to console him essentially at this period, as he is, we're told, fairly angry at what has transpired and the position he now finds himself in.
And Zeke, have you heard anything about when? Go ahead, Olivia, please, Olivia.
Sorry. I just wanted to touch on a part that Zeke brought up. In my conversations with Republicans who work in politics, there is a really strong anger for how the president has handled this. So much so that some people who have been pro-Trump from day one are saying, "I'm burning my MAGA hats," as one source told me. The others are just furious, and they're trying to decide how to proceed with this anger that they feel the president not only let them down, but that maybe their silence for the past few years of just kind of swallowing some of the president's dangerous rhetoric or decisions is now something of a burden that they have to bear after last week's events.
And so how does that factor into impeachment and thinking about that, Olivia? I wonder how that weighs on them, because you also have into this mix this real fear factor, because we know lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have literally been threatened. Their lives were in danger, and they continue to receive death threats.
Right. Well, it's still kind of unclear, because you have some Republicans arguing that impeachment will just be more divisive. But some of the Republicans that I talk to, especially some on a staff level, are even threatening to quit if their bosses do not support impeachment. That's how divided some of these staffers and their bosses are becoming. In addition to staffers who have just quit working for offices over those who didn't, vote to certify the election. So you're seeing kind of the staff uprising, which is just a whole other layer of what's happening. But there is still, the senators still are trying to decide what step is best for them, maybe for, their political careers, which always factors into it, whether or not they're going to say that it does, or if they really think that this is someone that they need to clean out from their party. Some of the, polls that we've seen is that President Trump's, even after all of this, he still has somewhat of a strong support. There was a Politico poll where he had 40% and Mike Pence had 18%. So, all of these factors are weighing in, I'm sure, to some of these senators' decisions.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Well, Zeke Miller and Olivia Beavers, I want to thank